All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Board of County Commissioners meeting this morning. As we always, we start with a prayer, reading, or thought, and pledge of allegiance. And we look to the audience or anyone who would like to participate with us on that. Are there any volunteers for a prayer, reading, or thought, or pledge? Seeing none, then we'll take it up here to the commission. Any volunteers for a prayer, reading, or thought, or the pledge?
For the prayer.
I'll do the pledge.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we humbly come before Thee at the beginning of this meeting, full of gratitude for the blessings that we have received, specifically the blessings to live in this county and in this free country where we are given so much opportunity. We ask at the start of this meeting that You might direct us in our decision making, that we might be thoughtful in our approach and mindful of the people that we have been elected to serve, and that at the heart of the decisions, their best interests might be kept in mind. We ask that You will continue to watch over this county and its good people, to help them rise and continue to be examples for the world of a place where freedom continues to give people the greatest capacity to succeed and find joy. We again express our gratitude for the many blessings we have and ask that You will direct this meeting and we might be continually inspired by Thee to be mindful and thoughtful in our decisions and do those things that will best serve the people of this county. And this we humbly pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. If you can, and if you would, stand for one nation under God. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Commissioner. We will now look to build our agenda. We'll put all of our agenda items, all published consent and regular agenda items on consent to either be approved, ratified, or as stated on our agenda. And then we'll go down through them and pull those off that we need discussion with. For me, on the published consent agenda, I didn't have any that need to be pulled off. Is there any? Okay. On regular, if we could hold number 1, number 2, number 4. On 6, 7, 8, and 9, I'm fine with them being on consent as long as we change the name to the current county attorney. That's okay, it just has the wrong county attorney on there. Okay. And can we hold number 11 for some discussion? We got 15 taken care of.
I'd like to hold 13.
13. 13, okay. Any others?
No.
Okay. All right, with that, so all other items have been left on consent. Any comments to those? Appropriate time. All right, we'll go back to regular agenda item number 1. Let's see, there's Paul. Sorry, let me get there. All right, there is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them I'd like to consider looking at, maybe some more explanation. It's loading. It's kind of a long document, so it's loading right now.
Let me just mention before I forget, I believe Mr. Mango is here. And I'm not sure that's one you wanted to speak about, but I know he's here and probably would like to address the commission on his request.
What's the name of his?
It's the Novos Caminos LLC, Richard.
Okay,
Mango, it's on the
that
top of
was,
page
that was
2.
one, that was
Okay.
one that I have. Maybe we could start with that one.
Sure, so, Mr. Mango, purchased this property recently, and then he appealed, the 2017, tax year valuation. And while, so he appealed 2017 to the Board of Equalization. He, had a hearing with the hearing officer here at the county. Then he subsequently appealed that valuation to the state to be determined. And while the 2017 process was playing out, the 2018 valuations came out. My understanding is that he appealed 2018 to the Board of Equalization. And he had a hearing officer report. I believe I have a copy of that hearing officer report, and it says something along the lines of, basically, your appeal is denied, and there was some reference to the 2017 appeal. And Mr. Mango represents that he thought the 2018 appeal would be wrapped up in the 2017 appeal, and he did not appeal the Board of Equalization hearing report from 2018 to the state. And so the 2017 went through, but then he was cut off on his 2018 appeal because he didn't file that to the state. So that's the basis of his appeal. I know he's here and would be probably happy to speak to you if you have any questions. I gave a recommendation to deny his request because the document he received from the hearing officer does state that the appeal is denied, and that if he wants further redress, he needs to appeal to the state.
Is it the one that I'm looking at that says your petition to the Utah County Board of Equalization is asking for reduction in assessed valuation of your property as shown by the above special parcels number for year 2018 is regrettably denied for the following reason? Is it that one? Is that the one you're referring to?
Well, there's a couple in here, and it could be that one. What does the next line say? That would trigger my memory.
It says this property is currently in the appeals process for previous years
Right, yeah, that's the one.
and no recommendation is made. And as I understand it, there was some, and I'm just going off of what I've read, so I just want to understand it better. When it came to the Board of Equalization, there was a discussion to allow it to play out its process with the state, and then, or am I mixing years with it? Play out its process with the state, and then we can
Well,
look at the,
personally, I don't recall if it was actually discussion at the Board of Equalization, because that was the hearing officer report, and I don't know, I don't recall if there was a discussion at the BOE meeting specifically about this parcel, or if it would have just come to you on a report,
oh,
you know.
okay.
So it would have come to you on a report, but then occasionally the BOE does discuss specific items on the report, and I don't have a memory of whether or not.
I
This
don't
item
either,
was
I'm just kind of
discussed,
going off
but-
of what I'm reading here,
Yeah.
what that was.
Yeah, so you read that right. This property is currently in the appeal process for previous years. No recommendation is made. The next line down says, for further consideration, you may appeal to the Utah State Tax Commission. And, yeah. So there's sort of, there's two sides to a coin. The language in the letter says that your request is denied, and that if you want to, for further consideration, you can appeal to the state. Then, of course, the other sentence says that no recommendation is made. That could be a little bit confusing to a property owner, and I get that, but
Can you address the $2.6 million in valuation versus the 1.2, I believe? valuation? It appears like there was a $2.6 million valuation. I think that was in 2016, if I remember correctly.
Well, yeah, so the property was, I believe it was valued at that, in that range in 2016, and in 2017, but then he appealed 2017. And it was still valued at that amount in 2018, because the 2017 hadn't been finalized yet. He was successful in getting a reduction in 2017, eventually, through the state. Well, the county had stipulated through the state process, but then 2018 didn't get the appeal, and so we couldn't change the value.
I mean, Paul, explain that. What's the logic there, or what's the principle behind that process? If there's been a successful ruling and a successful appeal that reduces the value, right? The standard practice would be that value kind of rolls forward, right? I mean, so
Right.
in ordinary course, if the value of your home in 17 was this $1 million value, it's not going to skyrocket up to 2.4 million in 2018, and then
Correct.
decline
Right.
again in 2019.
I think it just rolled through is what
Right.
happened. It rolled through the,
It rolled through.
past before, that's
Right.
that's
So
the
in
point.
2019, I would suspect that the value was lower, and I don't have it in front of me, but the 2018 valuation had come out before 2017 appeal had run. So the 2018 value was still in that, 2.5 million range.
Still in the pre-appeal value, right?
Right, yeah,
Even though the appeal was successful.
right, but after the value had come out.
Sure. I mean, I understand that
Yeah,
process.
procedurally,
Procedurally, but I mean, to me, that seems like a relatively high burden as a property owner if you have successfully appealed something to the state level. And
which is certainly a factor you guys can consider today.
And I think that goes to, the point is that, yes, it did run past, it was evaluated according to the previous, but there was a ruling from it that came in, and they weren't wrapped together as part of the other problem.
Which is, right, procedurally, Mr. Mango missed a very important step here, which was to appeal that 2018. And then it probably would have been wrapped together if he had appealed the 2018 to the state. Then we could have grouped those together.
you said Mr. Mango's here. Would you like to speak?
It's up to the board, Mr. Mango. but-
Yeah.
So the name is Rick Mango, and that's my LLC, the Novos Caminos. I appreciate you giving me a minute to speak. What happened is I just fill in a couple little holes here. I appealed the value, 2.6 million. I actually purchased the property that day, or the day before when the assessment would have come out based on the first of the year. I bought it at $1 million. So that's how far off they were on the assessment. They had me at $2.6 million for this property. So I appealed it and said, hey guys, look, here's the purchase contract, it's $1 million. The county wouldn't budge. Well, they said they would come down, but not that much. And anyways, we tried to go through the process. Look, this is market value. This is what I paid. It was on the market for like a year. This is pretty obvious. County guy wouldn't budge, so I said, no, I'm not going to pay a higher amount. So then it went to the state. And while it was in the
This is
state,
2017.
this is 2017,
Okay.
sorry. While it was at the state, this took quite a while before they would get us a hearing at the state level. And in the meantime, 2018 evaluation came out. It was the exact same thing, $2.6 million. So I appealed it. We went to the hearing, and basically the county, I forget what you call him at the county, but the county assessor, he said, you know what, when we go to the state for 2017, they're probably going to wrap them together anyway and say, hey, it's got to be about the same or a little bit higher, so there's really no point in us hashing this out again right now. So would you be okay if we just push it off? We'll just wait till the state gives their determination. When the judge does that, then that'll pretty much probably tell us what 2018 needs to be. And I said, yeah, that's no problem. So we agreed to that. I assumed the ball was not in my court anymore. It was in the county's court or the state's court, because that's what we were waiting for, and that's what he implied. The letter was sent out. I totally get it that I missed a piece on that. Because again, it is confusing, and I was just assuming that because they said no determination was made. So to me, that meant there was no decision made, and therefore there's nothing for me to appeal. Because they didn't say no, so couldn't appeal what they said. So I get it that I should have read it better and appealed that, and I missed it. But once the county guy, and so in the meantime, we had already stipulated. So we had stipulated to 1.2. I gave up the 1 million and said I don't want to continue messing around with this and wasting my time. So we did 1.2 for 2008 and 17. And then he said, and I'll cap it at 6% more for 2018. So I said, okay, fine. So we thought that was a done deal. And then he told me later, he said, you know what, you didn't appeal this. I said, what do you mean I didn't appeal that? And so we went through that, and then he said, you got to go to the state. I went to the state, and the state said, sorry, we can't. This is out of our hands. So I hired an attorney, and because it's about $15,000 of tax to pay just for missing, filing this thing. And attorney said, well, you can go before the county and ask, if there's that possibility. So basically the way that I look at it is, yeah, there might have been a technicality that I missed, but I shouldn't have been in this boat in the first place. I mean, the county I shouldn't have to fight them for a 2.6 evaluation on a $1 million property. If they're that far off, maybe there could be a little bit of lenience for me to not have to take that burden of that extra $15,000 taxes.
Okay. Do you know who you talked to that originally in 2017 or 2018? You said from the assessor's office that in the way you were, who was that? Was that emails or was that just a verbal? What was that? Who was it?
Conversations.
Yeah,
So the
conversations.
stipulation was done. The conversations were there, and I followed up with him and talked to him about that because I had asked him if he could help me on this process since the valuation wasn't an issue. I didn't come here to fight the evaluation. We've already agreed on that with the county. So it'd be like 1.3 or something like that for 2018. Yeah, so that was just verbally that we talked about that. 2019 has come out. You guys mentioned that, and I think it was about 1.5. So still way, far off from the 2.6.
Do you know who that was? I was just trying to confirm.
Oh, sorry, that's the head commercial assessor, Peter. Yeah, Peter Jepson.
Here. Let's see here. Okay. All right. All right. Any thoughts?
Don't have any other questions?
No, I appreciate you coming and sharing it.
Appreciate you considering it.
As we're kind of pulling these off one by one, is there a discussion on what we should do with this, if any?
Does any other staff want to speak to anything on this?
Chris Paulson, County Assessor. I've heard hearsay, but we have not directly talked, Peter and I, about this piece. But based on my understanding, what you've been told is correct. That there was an agreement that if it would have been approved, that would have been a 6% increase from the year before.
Thank
So I
you.
just wanted to clarify that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me, given the unique timing of that and the fact that the 19 valuation and everything is tracking towards what he was told and that he was successful in the 17 appeal, I think having an 18 that bumps up and then back down is an aberration that doesn't really make sense and it's not fair.
I would agree with
So
that.
I don't know what the numbers are on that. So we're saying it was the 1.2 for the 2017, and then 1.2 million plus the 6% for the 2018, and then 2019 was
The one,
the other one. I can't 1.5 or
1.5?
something.
what was that?
I don't know if we need to pick a number or if we just
just-
say, let's
just-
push it back to the assessor and say that they can use the value that they already determined for 2018, assuming that the appeal, right, assuming that they're not bound by the previous number. The 6% increase
Okay.
off
So that 1.2 plus the 6%. Okay.
of 2018.
Okay.
So technically, the Board of Commissioners can't adjust value. And so it would be to abate a tax amount that would approximate
So give
that
us
value,
give us the
right,
number
but-
then.
That's probably what I would say, but
So
I don't know
what's
what
the
that
number?
number is. I'd
Whatever
say
that
you would
number
probably want to
turns out to
abate
be.
a tax amount
We
that
can
would,
abate the tax amount so that the number
would-
is reflective
That it
of the one
match-
point two
matches that.
million plus a 6%
6.
annual increase.
Right. Okay, well, that will have to wait for our motion when we get there. Okay, thank you on that one. The Holiday Inn one, we can get to that one. Oops, let me get there. Okay, this one, as I read down through it, there was, according to the individual at the Holiday Inn Express, there was a 1 day which turned out to be about a week or so before things were filed. And after reviewing it, the treasurer's recommendation was to reduce the penalty from a 10% to a 5%. And I would agree with that. That even might be a little bit on the high side, but still, I would go with that recommendation from the treasurer's office. Anything further on that, Paul, or is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
That seem reasonable? Okay.
So in that one, there's no variance, because that's what's already recommended?
No, it's actually at 10%. They're recommending that we reduce it to 5%, just cut it in half. The
my
penalties.
recommendation was to deny the request.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll follow the recommendation of the treasurer in this one.
Okay. The next one is Kevin, is it Kraut? All right, let me get back into this one a little bit, see what, in my notes. All right, this one is a, if I remember correctly, this one is more of a
So this is a personal
Personal
property
property
account.
tax,
They didn't
personal
file,
property.
so they were estimated.
And I know, and I'm not, I know that they changed the law, you know, to 15,000 for personal property, going forward as of this year. It used to be $10,000, right, for personal property, kind of that personal property on small businesses. I'm looking at totals of this thing for 2015 at 120. I mean, I read down through their explanation with it. This is one of the most confusing taxes for small business owners. I get that. That's the reason why the state legislature put the $10,000 one, you know, in there, but there's still a filing period that needs to happen, and I get that. I'm just wondering if, in looking at the circumstances with an individual that has, you know, $120 on one year, $258 on another, obviously well below the 10,000, not even close to that, if there'd be any consideration for something there.
In the application, I don't think he's included value.
Right, I don't see a valuation amount in here. He, in his write-up, he says he's below the exempt amount.
And when I'm looking at the historical payments, that suggests that, I guess that was done by the previous owner. It looks like payments were made in 12, 13, 14, and 15. So he's saying he bought the business in 15.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're correct, because the previous payments were 0 and 11, 116 and 12. 137, 164, and 82.
Looks like in 2011, they probably filed a property list because they were not estimated in 2011, but they've been estimated every year since 2012. But yeah, the
Okay.
previous owner paid those payments.
And but that's the E by the
Yeah,
year
the E
is an
next to the
estimate, right?
year indicates that they did not file a property list.
The property list, so it was given as an estimate.
They're estimated.
Which does bring us to another dilemma, you know, our previous property owner was paying. Right? I get that, anyway. I guess the previous property owner was paying, but they were estimated.
You know, it's not a great recourse to this individual, but I think that a waiver of penalty and interest, I would be open to that. And unfortunately, this is just one of those things that, given the fact that someone else was paying in the business that he bought, I think that this liability attaches. And by waiving penalty and interest, you know, he knows the process now, and he can file.
So what, I don't see penalty and interest attached to this. Do you see that? I mean, you're talking, looking at the
There it
second
is.
one.
Yeah, there's some penalty and interest listed there.
Oh, I see it, yep, on the second part. Okay. I think that's reasonable too.
Right.
You all right with that?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, the next one is, the Autocraft, Fine Motor Cars. This one kind of stood out to me in multiple ways. One, you know, we have some taxes on there of $2.94, and we have a penalty of $25, an interest of $9.75, and you have one in 2019 that says the tax is $1.30, and then we have $25 in penalties and interest. Maybe if you could kind of walk down through this one, this, you know, again, this has similar feel to it as the last one.
Yeah, again, we're dealing with personal property of a business here. You know, he indicates that he had made some notation to the county that he had no personal property. Again, you've got to, I think this is maybe an issue of him not using the right forms, him not actually providing the right documentation. And so he's been getting a tax since 2014 and ignoring it every year.
Did he, I'm confused on this handwritten notes. Is that just handwritten notes that he put on his stuff, or was there anything handwritten that came in that wasn't on the proper form? That's
Well, I'm a little confused too. I'm not exactly sure what the handwritten notes refer to. but
I couldn't,
certainly, I didn't get anything handwritten.
okay.
I looked through the personal property system documentation history, and I didn't notice any you know, comments to that extent.
So the tax on this then, was it estimated as well?
You know, I think it is estimated, even though I told you that there'd be an E next to the
Yeah, I was looking
the
at
year, and I
that,
don't see that on this one, but
which is kind of interesting because, I mean, there was a little bit of a thought that it was some hand tools. Now I know that was crossed out. But $2.94, I don't know what hand tool you can buy for $2.94 nowadays, but
well, the tax amount was $2.94.
yeah,
right?
but still,
That's
I'm looking
right.
at,
So the
I mean,
property would have been a little, would have been in the
yeah, you're
hundreds
right,
of,
you're right.
the hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, it's true. Um, I guess on this one, I'd feel comfortable doing the same thing if we were to collect the tax on it, abate the penalties and interest. Is there a different thought?
I struggled to find the details on this one. The basis of his complaint is what? That-
So his letter is page 115. You know, which I think is nice that the state legislature this past year kind of cleaned this up to a certain extent. They moved it to 15,000 instead of 10. Plus, they said after 5 years of record, that it was, if I read it right anyway, that it was gonna be ongoing and they wouldn't have to have this little filing stuff every year. Is that how you read it too, from this last legislative
I
session?
gotta do a little more looking into that
Okay,
myself, to be
that's how I
honest.
read it. I don't know if Chris, maybe, is that correct, Chris? Okay. Yeah, so they're giving the small business owner, you know, those that are significantly under like that, this, instead of this burden of, that's part of the problem.
Oh,
That's
yeah, yeah.
administrative, is
Yeah,
that
once they
once they kinda
establish
get
it,
that after 5 years, they don't have to,
have to keep filing, yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with the penalty and interest.
Okay.
Anyway.
and that was the last one I had. Is there any
Mhm.
others that you were looking at?
I will,
Okay.
got the numbers here.
Okay.
I will move that we approve the property tax actions included in recommendation letter 2019-12 with the following modifications. Parcel number 905400023, we abate the tax amount to reflect 1.2 million plus a 6% increase. On number 97098, follow the treasurer's recommendation. Number 81628, we waive the penalties and interest. And on number 608566, we waive the penalty and interest.
Second?
Got a motion and a second, to approve the property tax actions as contained and also with the modifications. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Okay, number 2 is to receive the recommended proposals for the RFP.
Morning, Robert Baxter, Purchasing Manager. This is a little unusual situation we had with this RFP. This was an RFP that was issued over a year ago. And the recommending committee convened and went over them. And the determination was made at that time that they wanted to do a financial analysis. Now that we had the proposals in hand, to do an analysis to determine if going forward with any of the proposals was how that would impact the county and if that would be a wise course of action to proceed. That process languished and was never fully completed, at least not to my knowledge. So the process never moved forward. So a couple of months ago, we decided to resurrect this and bring it to closure. So the committee met again, and the majority opinion of the committee was to not move forward with any of the proposals. But in order to complete the process, since we've gotten these proposals to go, they went ahead and evaluated the proposals and ranked them. And so the recommendation of the committee is, or at least the majority of the committee, there was one dissenting opinion, was to reject all proposals. But the proposals were, the top 3 proposals were ranked as, it was a tie for number 1 and 2 between Enterprise and Acme, followed by Ken Garf. So, as I understand it, that leaves the the Board of Commissioners with the option to either reject all proposals, which is the recommendation of the committee, or to pick one of the top three for further negotiation or award of contract.
I wonder, Robert, I've been involved with this one for more than a year, probably. Now that we have had this RFP on proposals that are out there, can the commission go forward with a process in doing more in-depth research and analysis and actually picking one, or do we have to do it off the basis of the top three that come in? Can we ask for more information? If we reject all the proposals and then this question comes up into the future as to where we're at, do we have to go through another RFP process? I'm just legally trying to find where we can keep this conversation going.
Well, I think you'd have to comply with your procurement rules. And so if they provide that you can go and negotiate after you've rejected all of them, then you'd be able to do so. Otherwise, I think you're probably gonna have to start over.
So you're saying if it's rejected, if these are rejected, we can,
I have not reviewed the rules, and so as someone who,
But that would be my understanding, is that we would have to start over. if we
start all
reject
over?
them. Yeah.
And why would we want to
unless our rules
reject it?
allow for otherwise.
Otherwise, and of course, we could potentially award to one of the two top with the direction to negotiate, and if we don't get to a negotiated
Then we'd go
number
to
we
the next one?
like, and we could go through the process.
So,
I mean, that's procedurally, if this is an avenue we want to pursue, we could certainly go with the recommendation of hypothetically Enterprise. I mean, you could pick one of the two tops. And at that point, the direction would be to begin the process of negotiating a contract. We would come up with the terms that we think would be acceptable, and see if anything could be reached in that regard, if this is an avenue we wanted to pursue.
Right, Ben Vinoy with the Attorney's Office. I think we could do a parallel analysis, if you will. The recommendation was to do something else. We could continue to pursue that, or to at least flesh it out and conduct an analysis to figure out which would be better, as well as at the same time negotiating with one of the others if you'd want to go that way. Now, if all three were rejected, as was mentioned, this is already a year old, prices have changed, markets changed. It's not necessarily a bad thing to start all over again, whether it's this year or next year, because we could get maybe a different profile from each of the companies. So that wouldn't be a bad thing. But like I said, we could go pursue both avenues at the same time and see where either leads us.
As I understand it, also, the committee is just a recommendation. Ultimately, you make the call on what happens here, so. But have you checked, Robert, whether they even honor their RFP from a year ago, these companies?
Well, no, I didn't answer that question. I haven't checked it to see if they would, but, yeah, I mean, if one of these is selected, that just opens up the negotiation. I mean, we don't necessarily have to stick with the exact, dollar amounts. I mean, these were based on, 2018 models. And,
Right.
But there are also, some of the companies had different, models of, or proposals on how to approach it. It wasn't just a leasing vehicles. Some of them had, a maintenance package and all that kind of thing. And as far as I'm aware, that would still remain in place.
so if we did open up the negotiations with one of them, because the RFP, as much as we try to write it so that it fits a model, it was hard for them. It was hard for them to fit that box. And so during the negotiations with it now, we can expand that probably and say, let's negotiate and talk a little bit differently as well as we go through a process of looking at it on a financial basis to make sure it fits what we're trying to do. I would be in favor of probably continuing this conversation and picking one. If we pick one and negotiations doesn't work, we can always go to the next one, right?
Or we can decide that we X all of them and reopen an RFP too. And that's a question.
Yeah, I mean, we
I'm just
could.
So those are the options, right?
Right.
We can work down through the list, we could say, oh, this isn't really.
Yeah, I mean,
if
the way
we
the
can rewrite
procurement
the
rules,
RFP.
the way the procurement rules read is that you have to pick from one of the top three, so I think as long as you stay within those top three,
And
Fine.
we could negotiate back and forth if
I
needed.
believe so.
I think that gives us the best flexibility. Because it's, even if we were going down the path and reject them all and start over with an RFP, then we start with the same dilemma of how do we write this RFP to get what we're looking at, what we're looking for. And so we start in that same box again and trying to write it to match. Any thoughts, Commissioner, what's your?
For me, I was not involved in the original RFP, so I'm not even familiar with the scope or the exact service that we're talking about, so I don't feel like I'm prepared to have an opinion on this. That being said, as you explain it, and at least procedurally, I don't see any downside to saying let's move forward simultaneously with all of the top three. That just keeps all of our options open. Maybe we don't pursue it with anyone, but we have the right to at least negotiate with them.
And just to be clear, we had to pick one and
Have to
try to
pick
pursue
one.
that avenue, but we could also pursue what was recommended, which was none of these. That was the recommendation of the committees, don't do any of these, but in order to finish the procurement process, here's our ranking. So that was the recommendation. That being said, we could pursue both avenues, with picking one, but also analyzing different structure as was recommended.
Well, I'd like to see us pick one of the top two on there and start that. I think that gives us the greatest flexibility in keeping it open for negotiation and seeing.
Sorry, maybe I misunderstood. So we can't pick the top three, but if we pick one, we can still
We
negotiate.
can negotiate, and if we
And
don't like where
with
the
that one.
negotiation's at, we could go to the next one, or at any time in the process to say, this isn't working right, let's restart.
Okay.
So there would be all of those options available. Given that, I would move then that we receive the recommendation proposals for the RFP 2018 and award Enterprise the contract and move for further, it's not a contract, right? So I'm trying to get the verbiage right. Further negotiations with Enterprise.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to proceed with Enterprise in negotiations. And it's just understood that can tumble if needed, right? Okay.
Correct.
All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Thank you. Okay, number 4 is to adopt or deny an ordinance to amend the Utah County Land Use Ordinance, Chapter 6, related to requirements for large-scale developments. I think this one was continued, right, from last time for more discussion?
Okay, yeah, Brandon Larson, Community Development Staff. We've had a discussion on this one. Again, it's a cleanup of Chapter 6 to clarify some of the requirements, eliminate redundancies, kind of eliminate some complexities in the ordinance, and try to bring some uniformity to the requirements among the different development types. We're talking about planned unit developments, mountain home developments, planned subdivisions, and in one respect, it also considers looking at water a little more judiciously, irrigation water. So, if you have any questions, I'm definitely here to answer them. So,
Yes, I have some questions. If we go to page 4 of 103, can you walk through this review process, community development review?
on page 4 of
Yeah, it's number 7. It says community development review. The submittals shall be reviewed by the community development, determine if the submittals appear to be complete. If the submittals do not appear to be complete, the matter will be postponed.
okay.
The reason why I asked that is because later on, She's still down on the phone. Answer. Oh, hold on. Go ahead.
And I'm trying to determine where that's at. Is that in section 6.1?
Yes.
6.1,
617.
617?
617, yes.
Okay, gotcha. 617. And your question is about if community development determines that it's not, let's see, I'm looking through here. If the submittal does not appear to be complete, the matter will be postponed until the next submission deadline. Yes, that is in there. We've been pretty fair with the applicants. We have I don't honestly remember a time where usually we've just been, I guess it has happened occasionally, but usually it's a matter of just working with them to iron out the last detail, especially now with some of the changes made in 2017. We kind of have, I get two shots at this really. And so by the time it hits the official submittal, we've ironed out a lot of the kinks in their application. And so we've got to the point where by the time they officially submit it, I haven't recently had one where they've been delayed. We just work with them and their application, other than, I guess I can think of one recently that had some major issues. But yeah, typically with the typical applications, we're not sending them back and kicking them to the next meeting.
Okay, and I think you touched upon the question. The reason why I brought this question up is because it says that you say the submittals appear to be complete, but later on, like you said, the second bite to that apple on that thing, there is later on, it says that you have a final review of it, and then at that point in time, if it's not complete, which is it confused me. It confused me if we're saying they're complete at this stage, the submittals to the application are complete, but then later on, we have another chance to say, sorry, the application is not complete. I didn't know what complete was.
That's a good question. So when a complete application is submitted, in my mind, the way that works is they've submitted all of the correct documents, but we still haven't determined that, we haven't had the chance to go through and review it to make sure that everything's done. We're just saying, okay, it looks like you've submitted every document needed for the applicant, but there's still a process to go through to make sure that they've actually met the requirements in the ordinance for that particular document. So it's...
Okay.
The state code says that an application truly isn't complete until it meets all of the requirements of the ordinance. And so that's, frankly, until it gets through the county attorney's office, the county doesn't find that it's complete. So I guess that is a bit confusing. In one sense, we're saying that it is complete, but it might be maybe better to instead of use the word complete, use a different I'm not sure what that term would be, but something else rather than saying that it's complete. Because yeah, that determination is not made till the end of the process.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So complete in the sense of maybe the application, everything's been filled out.
Right.
But then the final completion is actually when they've done all the work to have that
right.
completed. Is that where you're?
Yes, that's
Okay,
exactly what I'm
okay,
saying. So
okay.
yeah, you've got it. They'll submit a complete application, meaning they've submitted all of the required documents, but I still have to go through and make sure that they meet all the requirements in the ordinance. I go through, I find it to be complete, and then Robert's office goes and does a final review as well. And it's when it's got through Robert's office that we officially say, okay, yeah, it's complete, and we're going to put you we're going to schedule you for a public meeting. So.
And that would be with, when it hits your office, I mean, you're not looking at policy, you're just looking at have they filled in the blanks to make sure they've got everything in there, right?
Yeah, have they attached all the required documentation, the required studies,
Right.
all those kind of things? As long as they've filled all those things out and have things there, I'm looking at some of those, like an impact statement meets the requirements of our ordinance, but I'm not looking at what they actually say. I don't I don't care so much about that. I'm looking at that they check the boxes, if you will.
Okay,
And just for your understanding, that section is not being modified here today.
yeah, I know.
And the other
Since
thing
it's
is,
up here and I was reading
Sure.
down through it, I thought we'd have some discussion on it.
the other thing I'd mention to you, that community development cannot modify these dates. So they can't waive them, because they're in the ordinance. So they don't have the ability to say, if an applicant comes in and they're 5 days late or something like that, I'm making an agenda, they can't say, oh, we're gonna waive that, because they don't have the ability to waive the requirements of your ordinance that you've created. So, just so you know that.
Right. Okay, the second one is, on page 5, I have it on 5 on mine. It says county commission review.
Okay.
It says the county commission shall review the application. The planning commission recommendation, the county commission may refer the matter back to the planning commission or other appropriate departments or officials to address issues, may state a timing to bring the matter back for further review, or may take action to approve or deny the application. As from discussions in the past, we've also put into language like this that the commission has the ability to modify, and I don't see that. I only see it as approve or deny. And in the past, when we get recommendations from the planning commission, we have changed that so that we can have some modification if needed and necessary.
We made that change to the land use ordinance in legislative matters for planning and zoning purposes, like text amendments and zone map amendments, and so that modification's been there. You, as approving it, these administrative type of applications, have the ability to attach conditions of approval, and that's still there. So, I mean, that's one way, I guess, to modify the application, is by attaching conditions to it. It is a conditional use permit in a way.
I
So
think if you go one more section, Commissioner.
Yeah, so if we walk down through that, because I see that second section on the final,
Final action, that
of the
does
county
have-
commission.
Yeah.
So is this first one, though, is this first review, when does that happen compared to the final action by the county commission? Because that's where I was trying to tie those two together, because I see that in the final action, but I'm not seeing it in this one up here. So is there just a process in which it's reviewed?
I think
and-
what that's doing, Commissioner, is it's giving you max some more flexibility. Again, you can review it and send it back, or you can take final action on it, make a decision.
So so 14 and 15 are basically together?
I think
in
that does
one.
occur the same, they can
Same
occur at
day.
the same time. You could have them subsequent weeks if you wanted to. Have your review one week and just look at it. Often you do that and you continue some of these to the next week and then take the final action. But what I think that the 14 and 15 is doing, and Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's giving you really more flexibility on what you do. You have the ability to send it back to the planning commission if they didn't consider something, or to address an issue that you don't feel like that the staff has addressed.
Okay,
And 15 allows you to
Fine with
take
that.
that final action and attach conditions to it. Now, please understand one thing, though. You can attach conditions, but the state law changed a couple of years ago to say that we cannot impose more requirements than what's in our ordinance. And so on an administrative review, a subdivision application. So if our ordinance doesn't say that you have to paint the curbs blue, we couldn't require that. I know it's kind of a silly example, but that's kind of my point, is that we can't require things that's not in our ordinance. But things that do come up
yeah,
during the hearings that maybe you weren't aware of, maybe it's on top of a old gravel pit, or on top of an old garbage dump or something that we don't know about until some residents who live there a long time tell you about that, then maybe there's something that we can look at when that
for
happens.
like an exemption, or an exception.
There's something, yeah, we may
If
have to go
there's
back and
some
look at some of
exceptions,
that and
we
see
could
if there's
use
an
some
appropriate
exceptions.
condition we should attach to deal with that issue. Not necessarily trying to create like a blue curb, but trying to deal with the exact things that are on that property, peculiar to that property.
Right.
And that also to show that they meet the requirements of our ordinance.
Okay. I just want to make sure that those two were pretty much tied together. Page 10, Under timing of construction, B, where does the 1 year come from? Sorry, I'll give you more context with this. It says allow for a period of time. It says county engineer who shall consult with the owner and the applicable utility poles. Anyway, I see in here this 1 year for construction, 1 year. Where does that 1 year come from? Why 1 year?
I think this is in 21B
Yeah.
on page 9, time of construction.
Yes, so, B is, they have 1 year, the applicant has 1 year to construct the improvements. They've entered into a bond agreement with the county, and they have 1 year from the date of approval of the county commission to complete the improvements. And, this section goes on, this was, some of this language in B was inserted, to give, some property owners who were concerned about having to move power poles and the costs associated with that. There was some flexibility granted in here. It's actually pretty challenging to use, because of, some of the, as I recall, somebody tried to use this a few years ago, and they have to provide a kind of an indemnification agreement to the county and provide like a insurance policy, and so this one's pretty tough to use.
Commissioner, I think you're asking about why 1 year as opposed to 2 or 4
Yeah,
or
why-
6 months.
Why
A-
one? And I know I'm mixing a little bit because they were talking about large scale. We're
Sure.
not talking about single home. I know that if somebody in the county have decided they want to build a home themselves, they might be hard pressed to get everything done in 1 year.
Let me tell you why.
But-
I think that's there, it's been there a long time, as I understand it. But 1 year has been typically attached with an abandonment by state law. So if you don't do something within a year, you've abandoned what you were trying to do. And so I think that we've tried to be consistent with that overall abandonment statute type thing. So if you sit on your laurels and don't do anything for a year on your approval, then it may be abandoned. And that's kind of the issue that we've kind of done across the board. Because the state of Utah recognizes 1 year as an abandonment.
Okay.
You're saying if you're actively working, this doesn't apply.
Correct. I mean, you can,
You'd go for an
and it
extension.
actually allows you to, as I understand, under,
Well, under large scale, I know they have phasing, there's phasing, they can phase the different.
and you're
parcels.
allowed to exceed that 1 year if they request it from you and you give them to them, up to 10 years. So if I have a big development coming in, and I know it's gonna take me longer than a year, when I'm coming the first time, I should ask you, hey, I think it's gonna take me longer than a year, it's gonna take me 3 years. Can I get it approved for 3 years?
And some developments, including Box Elder, have taken longer than a year to complete their improvements because of the scope of their development.
This is Bryce Armstrong with staff. Also, the year kind of ties in, a lot of these developments have a bond posted. They're based on estimates, and the price of products change, and so you try and want to have things consistent so that the bond that's being held is accurate too. So.
But if you're concerned about flexibility, it's there right now. They just have to ask for it. So right now, they could ask for 3 years, 5 years, up to 10.
They just ask for it.
Just
It's an
have to ask for it.
application. It's not a
Yeah.
paid application, it's just an ask for.
When they come in, they should ask for it.
Okay,
I mean, most developers are experienced enough to know it's gonna take a little while.
okay. Page 23, we talk about the engineer's stamp. And, I mean, the parts that were crossed out here, we talked about professional engineer's license by the state of Utah. I guess the question is that, I understand that the county engineer will want to review these, but if we have a professionally licensed engineer from the state of Utah who has demonstrated the applicable standards of this ordinance for the water supply and water sources, why does the county engineer then have to come back and review it? I'm wondering why why we're having,
Well, we have a county engineer, of course, who wants, the county wants to ensure that wants to check the work of the private engineer to make sure that it's gonna be a viable development, that the engineering work has been reviewed correctly, the calculations are correct. It's just a double check of the work.
Maybe just let me clarify that just a little bit, Richard Nelson, County Engineer. We're not looking at it in that kind of detail that Brandon's talking about, where we're checking to make sure their calculations are correct. We're looking to make sure they followed appropriate practices. You know, have they done the appropriate steps they need to make sure that they're doing the right thing, like say with stormwater? You know, have they taken into account what needs to be there? Have they looked at the drainages that are upstream of them, things of that nature? But the engineer who stamps the drawings is that's the person who's liable for what's on that plan. We're trying to make sure they've met everything in our ordinance and that they've used appropriate practices.
so you're not restamping, you're not saying,
Because it's not been something that's been prepared under my direction, so I don't stamp it as an engineer.
And all that's changed, Commissioner, is it used to be Brandon's office who was checking the engineer's work. Now we're saying, no, that's probably better left to the county engineer to check the engineer's work. And so that's really what's happening. It's kind of like having Brandon's office check the attorney's work. You know, it doesn't work well, so it's better to have someone, like an attorney, check the attorney's work. And so it's again, they're not trying to redo the whole work. They're just trying to make sure that they've checked all the boxes, they've met the requirements, it's good practices, et cetera. They're not really redoing the work. But it's better to have an engineer to review an engineer work than it is to have a planner.
okay,
It was really kind of meant to be a simple change.
okay. All right, thank you for that. That at least clarifies for me in my mind where we're at with it.
My only comment is that I prefer an engineering study. Wherever it mentions report, I know the red line included both options. I think there were some suggestions at the planning commission level. I'm more comfortable with the original recommendation that it's an engineering study.
I think staff's also more comfortable with study as well. I think that's gonna give you a higher quality report.
It gives you a better report. I agree.
I got one more question on street systems. This is page 28. Can you just go over B, you've inserted this?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you're, maybe if you can just kind of explain it.
Yeah, so we have a current requirement that, so let me back up a little bit more. So we have a general plan, and in that general plan, there's a transportation element map that identifies a number of roads, some that are built and some that aren't built. The ordinance currently says that if one of those roads goes through your subdivision, you have to build it. Some of those roads are like really long-term looking roads. They may not be built for 30 to 50 years, and so it's a real challenge to try to tell somebody to build 250 feet of a freeway through the middle of their property. I think the way I looked at this is that this is asking for a dedication of a road or a highway in relation to transportation planning, and it doesn't look like there may be some taking questions there. But what this isn't doing, it's not eliminating the county's ability to ask for a dedication when a subdivision's abutting an existing road. The requirements still say that they have to bring the road up to county's requirements, or if they are proposing roads that for their development, they have to, particularly for a subdivision, they have to build the road and dedicate them to the county. What this is doing, instead of requiring a dedication, it's saying, okay, there are roads that potentially may be running through your development, or there may be roads running through your development. You have to set back any homes 50 feet from the potential roadway, so we don't end up with issues like with North County Boulevard and have to tear down homes. So this is trying to look forward, trying to eliminate that, or at least try to prevent that situation in the future, and then to encourage people to to keep structures 100 feet back, just so we don't have to, so that they don't have to be torn down in the future.
So I guess my question on that would be, what map and what plan and at what time? Because we have some in phase 1, 2, 3, you know, future.
Yeah.
And you can put lines on maps and say, oh, this goes through your, let's just say this freeway goes through your farm. And then you want to develop it and it's future and it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years out.
Yeah.
And now we're saying you can't do anything with this property.
No, I don't think that's what we're doing. And so, let me give you a real-life example.
But we're not specifying if we're looking at phase 1, 2, or
Correct,
what.
we're not, but I think what we're doing is we're just putting them on notice, is what we're doing. Let me give you an example. In South, and I've talked to Richard Nielsen about this. In South County, there's a potential belt route, if you will. And that's been on our road maps for a while. And there's development going in that area where this potential belt route's gonna be now. Instead of having them come in and build that at this point, what we're asking, we're basically putting them on notice that that is gonna come in their area. In fact, probably in their yard or in their subdivision. And so we're trying to get people to move, to keep their houses outside that, so we don't have to come and get houses. And that, as I've talked to Richard, that's 30 to 50 years out before that ever becomes a possibility, really. But it is already on our.
Which route are you talking about?
The
Which
Nebo
one?
Belt Loop. It's a Nebo Belt Loop on the southeast corner of the valley.
Yeah,
That's the one that goes up through Payson, Woodland Hills, Elk Ridge, Salem, back into Spanish Fork.
yeah. That's already on our general plan.
It's on our general plans, on each of the city's general plans, it's on the MAG plan, that's the phase 1, phase 2
Mhm.
that you're talking about. And so it's on all of those different.
Now we're just trying to add it to the subdivision as a note.
So the map we're referring to is a transportation map that's been adopted by the county commission that is based off of those regional transportation plans. And we update those every several years.
Trying to plan.
Right. And I don't have any problem with that. I think that's great. I
And
just,
part of that effort that goes into that transportation element of the general plan is to coordinate with the cities, so that you're not coming down in the county on a 5-lane road and then you hit the city on a 2-lane road. You know, we try to make them so they're consistent across jurisdictional boundaries.
all I know is when we get down to the actual nuts and bolts of it, and we just did that one out there where we thought we're going through here, and also now we have to do the EPA, and the whole road swings.
Yeah.
And we're not even close to where we're talking about.
That's possible
It's
too.
way off over here.
Unfortunately, it's always possible.
That is.
And that's the problem we currently have. Technically, if it's on there, they've got to build it now. And it may not even be determined exactly where it's at. So we're trying to soften that a little bit and just have some disclosure so people can plan and locate things in anticipation of that potentially being there.
As opposed to requiring them to plan it, I mean, to actually build it, because our ordinance does require that now. And then we're trying to avoid that.
Okay. All right, any other questions, or else a motion be in order?
I would move that we approve regular agenda item.
There's there's a member of the public.
Sorry, I didn't think you were gonna move that quick. Richard White, I live at 216 Hobble Creek Canyon Road in Springville. And I just wanted to address just a couple issues that I saw in this ordinance that I believe might have some adverse effects in the future. And that was, if you look at section 6.4.d.6, and also 6.5.d.6, which are in regards to the paved road access for both mountain home developments and recreational resorts. There's some verbiage in here that I believe that could have some issues in the future. If there's not maybe some verbiage added to that. And in this, the change, part of the change to both of these road accesses has to do with adding that a road maintenance agreement between the previously approved and the new subdivision has to be in place. And what I would suggest that there might be an exception put in there, not an exception, but added verbiage stating that if there's a legally binding easement agreement between the two parties, that that requirement should be re-looked at. And the only reason I say that, right now, Commissioners, you know, I'm trying to put forth a subdivision right now up in Hobble Creek, Backcountry Estates. Our situation is different than this exception because our easement rights are being disputed. And so this doesn't pertain to me, but I see it could be a potential issue for somebody else in that if they have 100% good easement, everybody agrees that it's a good easement, the county attorney, both parties believe it's there. But then all other requirements are met, but then the previously approved subdivision decides they don't want to enter into a road maintenance agreement, well, then that property is now held hostage. In that, you know, somebody can't do anything just because of this verbiage where they've got a legal easement and that could stop them from doing what they would like to do. And so that's really my only comment that I have to make about that.
So Robert, I haven't researched that part of it to know. What's your thoughts there?
Well, he lost me on where he was at, so, I think I'm aware of the provision, and it would not apply to his subdivision, because he has a completed application, or at least he has an application that's been filed and went through the process. So any changes here would not apply to his subdivision.
Right. So what is it? I mean, we're
What was the
He
section that
acknowledged
he was
that.
talking about?
It was section 64D-6 related to paved road access. It's in here, it gives an ability for a mountain home development. First, it says that a mountain home development has to have access to a city, county, or state road, but then it goes in later and says, however, if you may obtain access through a previously approved development. And in relation to that, one of the new proposed requirements would be, okay, if you're going to obtain access through a prior approved development, you have to enter into a maintenance agreement with them. I think if I understand what Mr. White's saying is he wants something added to basically allow, basically for it to say something to the effect that either a road maintenance agreement is required or the establishment or demonstration that there's an existing legal access that would make it so they wouldn't need to get a road maintenance agreement.
Well, just one thing to understand on a paved road access for mountain home developments, these are private roads. And as you know, we often get complaints about maintenance on those roads. So much so that the citizens often ask us to take those roads and we often refuse to do so. I think this is trying to have both the new impact and the old impacted road to work out some sort of an arrangement as to maintenance of that road. Again, it's a private road. Has to be maintained to some level, but currently, a new development is going to impact an existing road.
Made sense to staff that if, a new developer is coming in, that they should participate in the maintenance of that existing road that they're going to use.
I don't think that actually is addressing the issue that Mr. White raises. Mr. White raised about access. We're not talking about access here as much as we're talking about the requirement to have a maintenance agreement between the parties. His concern, which he raised, is that you could be held hostage by I've got my development in, so I'm not going to allow a new developer to come in because I'm not going to sign a maintenance agreement with them. I think that's the
But that would only be applicable on a private road.
correct.
If I'm
Yeah, if it's a public road, you don't have that issue.
right.
Yeah, this is a private road issue. So,
I'm comfortable with the responses from staff.
I'd be reluctant on a private road situation to tell somebody they don't have to have an agreement for more access on it.
and again, we're trying to get them to have some sort of a maintenance. And to be honest with you, if what Mr. White describes happens, where you had a previous development come through and then you have a new development come in, and the previous one will not allow them to go on that private road, then, you know, you might relook at the ordinance at that time and say, well, maybe we're not gonna, you know, let them do that. We're gonna play a little harder. We're gonna figure out some other way to deal with it. But that, whatever, this is your ordinance, and you're welcome to, you can make modifications to it. I haven't heard any requested language by Mr. White as to what type of modification he would suggest. But, I mean, his points are raised today.
I would move that we adopt the ordinance stated in regular agenda item number 4, with the change that any reference to engineering report is replaced with engineering study.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance as stated in number 4 with the modification as stated. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. All right. Okay, number 11 is to review an approved amendment to contract 2019-395. I know we had some discussions with this. I just wanted to make sure I understood. I know on the no-shows, and I get that, you know, it's up to us to get them to come, and there's going to be those that don't come. And if I remember correctly, it was like $40-something for 15 minutes, like whatever that.
Yeah, Richard Nance, Director of the Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention and Treatment. The rate is the same as his administrative rate. And so what we're trying to do, this doesn't change the total amount of the contract at all. What we're trying to do is capture specifically what he's doing or not doing at the time.
Okay.
So it kind of leaves it up to us to make sure that we've got procedures in place to try to improve that. And so it's, in one way, it's a data tracking thing. We either book it as administrative time or we book it as no-show time. So for us, administratively, it's kind of a functional change to
No, I'm
make sure that
fine
we
with
can.
I'm fine with that part. The late fee though, what's going on with that?
Well, it's the
so-
same thing. We have clients that sometimes have a difficult time getting to the office. Sometimes they're just lazy about getting to the office, promptly for their appointment. So he bills a late fee to his private patients. So we want to kind of do the same thing, but it's the same thing again, reimburse
Who
him.
pays that late fee?
The client pays the late fee.
Oh, the client paid. Okay,
Yeah.
that was where my
So there's like,
misunderstanding
yeah,
was.
there's an offset
Okay.
to the
that's the
expense with
$21 or
identical
whatever.
revenue, yeah.
Okay.
Motivation.
Yeah.
Show up on time, right?
Now, we do cognitive behavioral treatment. This is part of the behavioral piece. So they have some financial skin in the game. You know, we're helping to train them to be, responsible with other people's
Okay.
time as well as their own, and this is
All right.
one way to do that.
I didn't. Thank you for that. That helps. Thank you.
Move that we approve regular agenda item number 11.
Second?
Get a motion and a second to approve the amendment to the contract as stated number 11. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Number 13 is to approve and authorize the signing of the Miss Utah County Scholarship Agreement.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ben Vinoy with the Attorney's Office. Last time this item was on the agenda, the Commission had asked that the representatives from the pageant, from the Scholarship Foundation, try to find a county facility that could host the event at no cost. There wasn't an appropriate county-owned facility that met those parameters, but they did reach out to the Utah Valley Convention Center and were able to get a quote at costs, which I think is the best possible location that they could find for the cheapest amount. So that amount is reflected in this contract. It was also recommended from the commissioners that the number of scholarships be reduced from 2 to 1. It's the same amount of the scholarship. However, the franchise fees for the ladies that win to go to the next level has been reduced because we've reduced the scholarship from 2 to 1. So for those reasons, the total contract amount has been reduced by a little bit over $2,000 from what is budgeted and what was spent in previous years. We have a former Miss Utah County, current Miss Utah County, and we did have a current Miss Utah Valley, I believe, that had to leave. They're here if there's any other questions for from the commissioners. We also included a reporting requirement in the agreement, asking the winners to come and report on what they've done for the previous year, to kind of showcase how they've benefited Utah County and what kind of work that they've done over the past year. Is there any other questions?
Nope. Did you want to speak to it, or did you?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Oh, my name is Anna Sun,
Welcome.
and thank you.
Good to have
Thank you
you
very
here.
much.
Why Miss Utah County? What's the importance of it? Tell us a little bit about how it's affected you.
Well, I haven't, excuse me, sorry. Participating in this pageant system has been one of the most beneficial things in my life. It has helped me so much with presentation and interview skills, and I think these are really skills that I can use in my life. And I've seen the impact that all the women who have competed at Miss Utah have made on their local communities. And also, I think that this system is really an investment in the young women of our county. And that's very important because, you know, when government and when non-governmental organizations and different humanitarian organizations go in to develop a country or a community, they have found that investing in young women is the best way to help those communities and lift them up out of poverty. And also because I think this county is pretty awesome. So my personal platform is increasing female involvement in STEM. And as you know, Utah County, Silicon Slopes is a huge tech hub now, and they are currently suffering from a lack of female talent to draw from. And that's really where I believe that Miss Utah County can really make a difference because, you know, as young women, we're often taught to look up to beauty and glamour and those things, but when you attach that and harness that energy and admiration and direct it towards important issues in our community, then it really helps to make a difference, especially in the minds of young children.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one note, commissioners, the version that was uploaded did have a formatting error that will be corrected. Just a spacing
There was
issue.
a spacing issue on the one.
Yeah, so I fixed that. Any other questions, comments?
I guess I'll just make a comment that this gives me no enjoyment, we continue to have some hard conversations. You know, our county, I think it's always the responsibility of elected officials to try to look at what we're doing and see if there is, you know, the activities that have continued to happen in the county are the proper role of the government. I think that even reaches a higher standard of review when our budget is out of balance, like it has been for the last 2 years. And so I think we continue, and we're about to enter budget season with all of the departments, and we're going to continue to ask a lot of difficult questions of every department to make sure that they're tightening the belt in every area and asking, are these programs or these things that you're doing entirely necessary? And so this is one that has actually been in the commission's budget, and as a commission, we have found a handful of items this year that we've been able to eliminate out of our county commission budget, trying to be examples to the other departments. And so for me, I just don't see this. I see this as something that can be supported in the community through private donations and sponsorships, but I don't see it as a necessary part of our commission operation or county operation. So that's why I will not be in favor of it.
And on this one, I am grateful that we've been able to reduce this yet again. So it's got to a point where I'm comfortable on it, and I think we can continue to evaluate it moving forward, because I think there is some investment value in the scholarship portion and the opportunity it affords, but I'm very grateful that we've been able to scale this back down a little bit.
Okay. Motion to be in order then.
I'll move that we approve and authorize regular agenda item number 13.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 13. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
So Commissioner Ainge opposes, and Commissioner Ivey and Commissioner Lee are in the affirmative. That passes 2-1. Okay. We are now at our closed meetings. We do not need items number 26 or 27.
Motion to strike regular agenda items number 26 and 27.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to strike agenda items number 26 and 27. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hold on.
Aye.
Right-
That passes.
Right, hold on. Yeah, we're
Have
gonna
to-
have 25. Okay. I'll move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for closed meetings as stated in regular agenda items number 25 and 28 for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve set a date, time, location as stated for number 25 and 28. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. We do have a work session, a presentation of the building needs and assessment by GSBS Architects.
Commissioners, I'll just introduce this really quick. About a year and a half ago, we started a building needs study. Well, it actually even predates that. We've had GSBS on board for about a year and a half. They've been looking at everything here on the downtown Provo campus, as well as items out at Public Works and what our needs are in the north end of the county. They have had prepared a lot of information, and then we had the elections that happened last fall. So with a couple of new elected officials, we asked them to go back and take a new look at that with those newly elected officials in there, try to modify their report to fit what those new officials had, if it was different than what was with the previous people. They now have GSBS now has the presentation ready to present to the commission. So they are going to take a few minutes, and Christine or Brian, which one of you are going to take the lead? So Christine Richmond will take the lead, and then Brian Jacobson here with her.
So we have a PowerPoint. I think it would be helpful for the huge audience. So just as we're doing that, I'm Christine Richmond. I'm a principal with GSBS Architects. I'm a planner by training and trade, and I was the project manager on what is actually a two-part project. I'm the project manager on part one, which is an evaluation of the use and future needs of the facilities, all of your facilities here in the county, with a specific focus on the Public Works campus and the functions and buildings here on the downtown campus. With me today is Brian Jacobson. He's an architect with our office, and he provided the technical support to the evaluation of your current buildings and your future needs, but also took a much closer look at the current Public Works campus, and he'll talk in more detail about that. Not with us today is Scott Henriksen, who is our principal in charge. He is visiting Southern California, his adorable 2-year-old granddaughter down there, and he apologizes for not being here with you today, but he has reviewed and approved all of the recommendations that you're going to see, and I know many of you have met with him as we've been going through this process. So. That reach up here.
Good luck with that.
Thank you. Um, It's just the slides, so no audio. We're gonna do the audio ad hoc. So this is the report that we've submitted, and I assume it was in your packets for today. For the presentation, we've just pulled out several key items that we wanted to talk about with you and make sure that you're aware of as we go through the process. I can figure out how to make the buttons go. So the scope of our project was to evaluate the buildings at the Public Works and downtown campuses for code compliance, safety upgrades, and current utilization in their current form. Project future 2040 space needs at both of those for the buildings and functions at both of those campuses. That is a process where we use current service levels. We identify adjacency and coordination needs between functions and departments. We project growth based on the countywide population and also the unincorporated county population. We also take a look at projected increases in building square footages and total staff, because that drives some of the needs in some of your departments and functions. And then we developed options and recommendations for addressing current and future needs in the county. So one thing I'll start with is that based on our evaluation of what you currently have, which is step one in the overall planning process, you are space constrained. I think everybody who works within your buildings knows that it's really hard to find room for new functions or new needs as you go through the process. We've seen during the time of the project itself, we've seen a lot of juggling and moving about as everybody tries to find room for necessary functions and key staff and personnel. So our process included on-site reviews. We walked through all of the buildings and all of the spaces. We interviewed key personnel. And then we supplemented those face-to-face interactions with an analysis of current level of service, current staffing needs, and for those analyses of current level of service and staffing levels are what we use as a basis for what type of space and how much space you may need by the time we get to 2040. The facility evaluations, as we've said, focused on code compliance, safety, and security, because most of these buildings were built before some of our current considerations for safety and some things that have happened around the country in regards to security. We also looked at how the spaces are being utilized and overall functionality. When we think about what you're going to need in the future, we reviewed department-generated projections of need, but we also supplemented that with a quantitative analysis of future need based on your current levels of service and growth estimates for 2040. You have some functions that serve a county-wide population, so in that case, we used the projections of county-wide population. You also have functions that serve just the unincorporated area. So rather than using the regionally generated projections for unincorporated population, we held that constant at about where it currently is because of your policy to ensure that new developments are either
Annexed into.
Thank you.
Yeah.
or incorporated into a new jurisdiction. So that holds it at constant at about 12,000. And we also made a projection based on those two growth drivers of future total staffing and future total building square feet that would have to be under care or by your departments. And then had a lot of discussions, some of them with you, some of them with other members of the staff here at Utah County, to develop some options for how to address the current challenges and issues and also address 2040 need and take into account room for future growth, because you're not going to stop growing at 2040. We know that Utah County is one of the big growth areas for the state, and will continue to grow to 2065 and beyond. So, and then also how using your facilities and how you position them in the different areas where they're located, how they might be able to contribute to economic growth within the county. So just to, cut to the chase, and then we'll go back and talk about how we got there. The overview of our recommendations begins with the construction of a new public works facility on the Spanish Fork property that was purchased for that purpose a few years ago. And to add square footage on the downtown campus by constructing 2 new administrative buildings on the site of this current building, complete a seismic upgrade and remodel of the historic courthouse government building, and expand the existing health and justice building parking structure to provide needed parking once those expansions occurred. Improve the public space at the downtown campus by tying into the pedestrian elements that have been constructed as part of the Provo City Center Temple, and connecting those across the new light rail or BRT line, and also reconnecting to Center Street to provide that type of circulation, and also continue to provide space for public festivals and activities here at the county center. Those 2 things in particular will help contribute to ongoing economic development in the Provo core. So, public works and the basis for our recommendation. There are a number of code compliance issues at the current public works campus facility in Provo. And Brian will talk about those in more detail in just a moment. There are also a number of inefficient design issues and inadequate facility issues at that current facility that would require some investment. Whether you moved the public works campus or not, they would need to be addressed. And to address adjacency and coordination issues and accommodate projected future growth. So, we evaluated the current public works site to be able to accommodate 2040 needs and to address the code compliance, equipment storage, and maneuverability issues, and to address the fact that they are also space constrained and that we need to address some adjacency issues. So Brian's going to talk about the 2 options that we use to evaluate viability of the current site to accommodate our goals for public works.
Brian Jacobson, GSBS Architects. The second part of our contract was to look at public works, and it first started with programming their needs. And it was in association with Christine's work of hitting that 2040 need of public works itself. So in programming that, we also had to look at, and were requested by you commissioners, to look at the existing site to see if that's even viable option. Though we do know that we do have the Spanish Fork property available, it is open land. It's not dealing with any existing things that would hinder us to work out there. But noticing on this diagram here, it's in order to accommodate, and actually we don't accommodate 100% of everything in this diagram, that there are so many things that overlap each other that makes this site very unfeasible to work properly in terms of for them to do their function. The existing fleet building, which is where they do all their maintenance on their vehicles, which is the building on the left side, and I think it's called Building 2, correct. If you've ever been there, it's very inadequate for them to do their work. Case in point, it's not even deep enough to get certain vehicles in there to work on especially in the winter months. So to accommodate that, you would have to create a bigger building in terms of larger depth, But here again, going back to some of the code things, that existing fleet building does not meet current seismic code. So there would have to be an extensive upgrade on that building. The administrative piece, there is such a great need to enlarge that. As you see, we'd have to add a large chunk of that to the existing building. And we'd have to remodel the inside. But Christine didn't mention how, did you want to make that mention about the need, why we have to do this for the sake of how it impacts downtown campus? Or?
Well, we'll talk. Why don't you finish?
Okay, so we'll finish that. So again, there's a lot of vehicle requirements for public works. And again, Richard, you could chime in, the city engineer, excuse me, county engineer, regarding how many vehicles they have. We have 141, let me see, I had it up there. Sorry, it's too small. See, 140 standard vehicles. Or is that 120? Sorry, it's very small. And then we have large vehicle storage. Well, again, these are the vehicles that are necessary to be either covered or being covered and conditioned because of the type of vehicle that they are. None of this occurs out there currently. There's really 16 stalls to put large equipment in, and they don't even fit within that building. So, again, there's a lot of incidental staging areas, as you can see on there. Those are the things that are not in color that are noted with spaces. And that's just for them, as fleet especially, to stage vehicles that are either going to be serviced, need to be serviced. They're either new vehicles coming in, vehicles going out to be auctioned off. I mean, there's a huge need for vehicle staging also. But then again, I haven't even talked about all the existing utilities on the site that would totally impact doing any kind of remodel or additions to this site. They currently are not on the sewer system. It's all septic. There is power running all over the site. Again, anytime you put a new footprint down, we're having to relocate utilities at the same time. So with that, what we know is doing this kind of project takes a lot of time and effort and money because of those factors. So option 2, we were told to, well, what if we just phase this kind of project? Option 1 was trying to deal with what we had there. And again, it didn't meet all the requirements. But here was a chance to look at it in the sense, can we use this property and phase it? Well, we all know that phasing a project takes time and money. We would not have to phase a project if we go out to Spanish Fork. Here in the upper left, I believe I listed all the phasing that would have to happen in order for things to occur. Take into account, you'd have to build the new administrative piece, so then you could tear down the administrative piece, so then you could build some storage. But the bigger factor is that fleet building, again, is if we had to take that down to build a new one, where do we go with services in the interim? So there's some issues there that make phasing kind of hard. And here this simplifies all the, and you can see the proportions of vehicle storage to buildings. I mean, it's just incredible because they are taking care of over, I think isn't it, Richard, like 750 fleet vehicles for the whole county. So, yeah. Here again, this would require a lot of utility relocation. As you can see, we did put those on there so you could see how power, sewer, water, gas, everything would be affected there. Here again, we'd have to do something about connecting to city sewer because the existing site is on septic. So I think that's in a nutshell. To really kind of show you the impact that has to try to deal with the existing site and where it makes sense to go to Spanish Fork in that respect. So, thank you.
So Based on our analysis of the ability to meet current and future needs at the existing location, and the difficulty in achieving that, we're recommending that the new Public Works campus be built on county-owned property in Spanish Fork. In order to do that, that will allow you to address some deficiencies that have been identified at the current campus in the most efficient way. Just to list them, Brian mentioned most of them, that the fuel island is currently out of compliance. The fuel tanks are not up to current standards, and I think it's just a matter of luck they haven't leaked yet, given they're past their date. The fleet building is not up to current seismic requirements. The fleet building doesn't accommodate all vehicles. Salt storage is not up to stormwater pollution prevention requirements. It needs additional clearances. It needs additional control and stormwater control elements to it. Current safety issues with access to southbound State Street and the security of the site is not currently up. Is currently compromised and thefts have occurred. Now, going back to the stormwater pollution prevention requirements, it's not just the salt storage facility, it's also making sure that all vehicles and all equipment that have certain chemicals or certain materials in them are undercover so that rainwater doesn't cause them to leach into the stormwater as well. This is important because this is something that EPA fines governments for. And they have evaluated Utah County in the past and identified certain things that need to be addressed. And they should be addressed before EPA comes back and decides to issue a fine, which they have done to Washington County in the past. So it could be a quite large fine. So our recommendation is that that gets dealt with as quickly as possible to make sure that you don't become subject to a fine from EPA for that. We also are recommending that in addition to the functions that are currently located at the Public Works campus, that the Development Services Group that is right now in the historic courthouse be relocated to the new Public Works campus, as well as Extension Services and 4-H and Agriculture Inspection. Those are all located here on the downtown campus. We're recommending that they be included in the new Public Works campus in order to free up space here at the downtown campus and also put them in a location that seems to make more sense in terms of what their function is and the people that they serve. So before we move on to the downtown campus, do you have any questions about the Public Works recommendation?
Did you look at all about the legal requirements of any of those departments being based in the county seat?
Yes, and that applies very specifically to the surveyor. So you'll see on our recommendation for the downtown campus that we recommend that the surveyor have an administrative office, just a single, like 200, 300 square foot office here as well. It makes sense to keep the surveyor's crews located with the Public Works campus rather than here because of their equipment and their trucks. That doesn't make as much sense here at this location. But in order to meet the statutory requirement of all elected officials being located with the county seat, we are recommending an administrative office here for the surveyor. So the basis of the recommendation for the downtown campus, we wanted to address building safety issues, address building age and maintenance issues, address immediate space needs, address adjacency and coordination issues, and accommodate projected growth here at this campus, in the buildings on this campus. The projected 2040 downtown campus needs add up to 238,400 square feet, Right now, you have available to you 223,300 square feet. The projections of need are based on the current level of service that you're providing as it is expressed in staffing levels. So as the county grows, just in order to maintain the current level of service, staffing levels will have to increase with population. And so that's what the basis of this projected need is. And just to remind you, it's not the same population projection for all functions. We did hold the population for most of the unincorporated services constant. So this is a function of how much the county is growing, how quickly you're growing, and you're projected to continue to grow. So we came up with 4 options that we evaluated as part of the downtown campus process. That we started with parking. You currently need 561 parking spaces based on the Provo City parking requirements for government buildings, which gives you a 50% reduction for being a government service from their standard office requirement of 1 space for 5,000 square feet. So that means you need 561. You're well above that. You have plenty of parking right now. Now, whether or not it's where people want it to be is a different question, but in terms of the number of spaces, you have plenty. At 2040, with the recommended new square footage, that goes to 905, which means that you will need some additional parking spaces. So we have a recommendation for how to meet that future need that we'll talk about in just a minute. Option 1 is to refurbish this building, do a seismic upgrade and refurbish the historic courthouse, construct a second administration building, and then reallocate space within the health and justice building. So this is the site plan of option 1. The yellow building is the building that we're in right now. The orange building would be a new administration building, and the blue building is an addition to the existing health and justice building parking structure in order to, oh, that's blurry, to gain adequate new parking spaces to serve the increase in square footage anticipated on the campus, the downtown campus. So that blue square adds 176 stalls to the campus for parking. This is,
Of course, that's assuming that parking, that we can get that property too.
that is assuming we can get that middle one. Now, we did do, that's because this, let me go back. Did I go forward? I went forward. That is a bay and a half in addition to the parking structure. If you don't get the property, you can still do a 1 bay addition to the parking structure, and then you would retain part of the surface parking that's there, and then and I can't remember the number. We probably gained 40. We gained 40 from the bay and a half, as opposed to 1 bay. So it would be 135 if we can't pick up that additional property. In that case, you may want to do an overall parking study and perhaps enter into a shared parking with the ward house across the street for during the day. Provo City parking requirements do allow those shared parking agreements to address your need.
Okay.
So this is a 3D view of the recommended height and massing to that new building. You can see it has 5 stories, 3 of which are showing in the orange color and 2 of which are showing in white. That recommendation is to build 5 stories for future needs beyond 2040, and that the colored in, the finished levels, the 3 levels, would be to meet the need through 2040. So this is building in some additional growth so that you don't end up in 2040 space constrained like you are today, to give you a little bit of flex in order to address future needs as well. So in that new administration building, on a preliminary level, this is how we would recommend it be used, which is to move the county commission functions, your functions, the county attorney functions, the assessor, justice court, and then have 2 floors ready for future use. Just want to make a note about these stacking diagrams and the uses that we're recommending in each of the buildings. This is subject to final programming and discussion in the event that you do move forward with any of these options. So there's nothing that means that you have to put the uses in the way that we're showing them. This is a way for us to make sure that all the puzzle pieces work together, and that we can get the adjacencies and the functions in the places that we want.
Sure. In other words, if I'm understanding, you're more confident and you're speaking more declaratively about the needs, the overall needs of the buildings. It's, obviously there's a lot more flexibility of the final programming and which departments need to go where.
Right.
But you do feel pretty strongly about the analysis that you're providing.
About the numbers,
total needs.
yeah. And then that will, moving commission, county attorney, all right, I wanted to go back, not forward. Yeah. There. The county commission functions, county attorney, and the assessor and the justice court coming out of the health and justice building, which we'll talk about in a minute. But moving the top 3, the first 3 out of this building, frees up space here in this building so that we can start to address some of the adjacency issues. You've got the auditor clerk now with moving some of the function into the Chamber of Commerce, the former Chamber of Commerce space at the Health and Justice Building, and they have some people, in other areas. You've got the auditor clerk is spread out over the whole campus. This recommendation reconsolidates them into this building and addresses the identified need for an election space that the new clerk has identified. It also allows the assessor's office to be consolidated all onto one floor for adjacency purposes. It moves the GIS function and other information services functions so that they can all be in the same building and adjacent to each other as well. So it addresses some of those adjacency issues that we have identified in the early walkthroughs. Okay. One thing about the current administration building is that it is due for a major mechanical upgrade, given the age of the building. And so the recommendation, the option to stay in this building will require the people to move out, at least for half of the building, because the building is, the mechanical system is half and half, the wings. So you will need what we call an empty chair for the period when you have to move people out of this space in order to do the work that's required and to bring it up to the most efficient functioning that we've identified.
In other words, since I have already had the sneak preview of this,
Yeah.
really under any scenario here, this one, because there's a renovation or in a total rebuild,
You need an empty
people are
chair.
going to need to start leaving.
Yeah.
Departments are going to need to
We're
get out
gonna
of
need
this
to empty
building
people out.
and
Yep.
lease elsewhere. Okay.
Well, lease and we'll get to that phasing discussion, or move out into other spaces temporarily. And this is, Brian referenced this a little bit. One of the reasons that we recommend doing the public works facility first there were several. One is to address the code compliance issues. Another one is to provide an empty chair. If you build the new public works facility in Spanish Fort, you'll have a little bit of extra space there because we'll be sizing that for 2040, and so there will be some, 20,000 square feet that we can put people in there. There will also be the existing administration building at Public Works where we can move people as an empty chair. All of that would be available to you. We also know that there's some space at the Central Utah Water Project building, and that you could get a little, for a relatively affordable rate, and then everything else would have to be leased on the open market here in downtown Provo or elsewhere, depending on location needs. Because there are some people who need to be here in the core of Provo. The historic courthouse, in this particular scenario, the public defender would stay there, and there would be public meeting space, because one of the needs that we know you have here on the campus is for meeting space. Right now, you've got the big space in the basement that is used by extension services, but if that's taken over by other uses, as you saw in the stacking diagram for reuse of this building, you do have a need for meeting space here, and that would be expensive space to do the seismic upgrade and the renovation of the historic courthouse. But it's our recommendation that you do the seismic upgrade and the renovation of the historic courthouse regardless of the scenario that you choose. It's an important building to the community, and if you're going to continue to use it, you need to fix the seismic issues.
We had some conversations about the ability and the extent of to renovate the interior, because the space is not the best layout for modern use. Did you look into that
We
further?
did look into that, and that's a really hard thing to do with this type of building, and Brian can speak to that. Do you want to talk about?
This type of architecture and everything, and then if you know the way that the lobby and everything is designed, it really only lends itself to those perimeter type offices in that. So again, that's what you see in this scenario here, is that we've just used that same perimeter space so that you keep that aesthetic also of, which is the prettiness on the inside of this building, is the lobbies. But it would be very difficult to deal with.
In your analysis, would it have made sense, or would it be interesting to put this particular chamber in the historic courthouse, or are you just putting that all together in the new building? And that's probably...
Jumped ahead to my recommendation.
Okay.
Part of that recommendation and is because your function, the commission function, is the most visible connection people have to their government. And that building is the symbol of Utah County government here in this community. And so there are, you can renovate and use that space in a number of different ways, but the way that reconnects it to government would be to put the commission offices in that space. And Commissioner Ainge, we do see some of these buildings that are designed on this particular plan where they have put, I don't have a pointer, where they have put walls, usually glass, along those edges. It does mean that that lobby space gets allocated to those functions that are adjacent to it. It doesn't necessarily make that lobby space any more functional in terms of turning it into an office. It's still, because of the way the walls are constructed, from my understanding, I'm not an architect, I'm making, but it pushes, you still have to push sort of those functions out, and you don't pick up a lot of usable square footage that way. Did I miss?
Oh,
Okay. Right. And then the Health and Justice Building. The Justice Court, which is located in the Health and Justice Building on the 3rd floor now, there are 2 courtrooms. We're, based on projected need, sometime between now and 2040, you'll need a third courtroom. That would mean recapturing almost all the space on the third floor and doing the third courtroom there, which would result in DDAPT and the sheriff's office, who are currently located there, having to relocate. That's an option. However, when you add the third courtroom, it's going to be really difficult to construct that in a way that meets the current criteria for a courtroom. One of the big considerations is parking. The court personnel under the new criteria are required to have separate and secure parking so they can have access without having to go through the general public areas. That would be hard to do here on the third floor. So we're recommending that a new justice court be constructed in the new building to current court standards. Okay, and then the rest of that building becomes the health department and meeting space and DDAPT, because they have they're both countywide functions, and they have increasing needs and growth. Okay, so that was option one. So if we think back to what we wanted to do with the downtown campus, we've consolidated the departments, we've addressed current and future space needs, and we're maximizing the use of existing buildings, but we haven't addressed the public space and or restored the historic connectivity. This is the planning level cost estimate for that option at $72.3 million, about $210 per square foot. Just a note about the planning level estimates. These are very early in the process estimates, and those numbers will change based on final programming and decisions about finishes and the actual massing and style of the building. So,
Sorry.
yeah.
That 72 million, no open share costs included in that, right? No leasing costs included there.
So, no.
And there was no cost on the public works side?
So we did not do cost estimates on the two options for the existing site for public works, because there were so many unknowns involved in that process. And the actual cost estimate for doing public works at the Spanish Fork site will come as part of that phase of the project. But Brian, did you want to talk?
Well, we are contracted under the programming sector of the 2040 needs that we've done for Public Works itself. We will have a cost estimate. It's actually currently underway. So that is established, but not for the existing site, no.
Although, okay, for instance, one of the options for the existing public works site would be to build a 4-story administration building. We have, $250 per square foot estimate for construction of an office building. We can get you at least that level of an estimate. What we won't have are the estimates related to relocating all of the utilities and things that would be needed in order to make that viable. And we won't have estimates related to upgrading the storm drainage to accommodate that stormwater protection requirement. So option 2.1 demolishes this building and constructs two new administration buildings in its place. It also allows us to redevelop the site to improve connectivity in the public space. And once again, we're recommending seismic upgrade and refurbishment of the courthouse, and the same changes to the health and justice building that you saw in option 1. Here in this is the option 2.1 site plan. You can see buildings A and B are the two new administrative buildings, and that little Building C that connects them is a sky bridge over an extension of First East to reconnect First East to Center Street in order to restore the historic Provo City block configuration. That, as we're thinking about it, would be more of a pedestrian friendly type of space, and also allow that circle. I don't have the pointer, but you see the circle?
Tree.
The tree, that's the tree. So it's right here. So that expands sort of the opportunity to highlight the tree and use and create more of a plaza around the tree. This allows you to continue to have community events here and connects it a little bit better to the rest of the grid in downtown Provo. This is the 3D view. Once again, you can see that we're recommending that several floors be retained as for future growth. We also have the same parking structure expansion. So in the new administration building A, we're recommending the completion of 3 of the 5 levels with commission functions, the clerk auditor, some public meeting space, and the county attorney. You'll see that the county attorney is on the 3rd floor. That's not all of the required county attorney space, but we are recommending putting additional county attorney space in the recommended new administration building B on the same level so that they're actually connected by that sky bridge on the 3rd level, so that we achieve County Attorney Levitt's goal of having all of his people on one floor. That's a difficult thing to do with current floor plates and the size of the office. So you can see this building, in order to accommodate everyone, we had to include some current functions on level 4 as well. Okay. So this option achieves everything but the reuse of this building. So it restores the historic connectivity and maintains and improves the public space for festivals and community activities in a way that we didn't achieve with option 1. This is estimated at $90.6 million or $236 per square foot. So more expensive. So we looked at an option where we didn't do both buildings, both of those new buildings at the same time. We would demolish this building, build one of those 2 new administration buildings now, saving the second building for the future. So it's the same site plan, but building A and the sky bridge would come sometime later. This is the 3D view. We would have to have 1 additional floor to the first building in order to accommodate everybody. And that's everybody in there. But we move you to the historic courthouse. Okay? So that achieves all of our goals. It maximizes the use of the historic courthouse, but it does not reuse this building. So this is showing at almost $92 million, but in order to look at it for the current outflow, we would subtract that 19.2 for the building A, because that would happen sometime in the future. Okay. So we're at 73 if we do it that way.
Now, the other option there, which I don't know if you've looked into this, I know I asked it previously and I've asked it in our other departments. That's the unfortunate thing about this is if under these plans, this creates so much more capacity, which if we had coordinated with the city of Provo, with their new build, which I don't know how locked in they are. I think they are pretty locked in at this point.
Yeah.
And then we also have the state facility. And we should obviously be coordinating with the state if they have desire for additional space or they want to be part of this kind of rebuild.
So we, part of the process that we went through internally was we had a design charrette with a number of our designers and talked about all the ideas that were starting to percolate around this location, around the downtown campus. And the question of the state space need came into play. With this layout, whether it's this one or the other two, the 2.1 and 2.2, incorporating the state into the overall rework of the site is a viable option. They own, they own their corner of this universe, and this option allows you to coordinate with them about how to move forward and what to do in the future. It doesn't lock them out. It allows you to have that conversation with them about what to do about their corner. There's plenty of room you could put a sort of a building similar to Building A for them there that would address Center Street and would allow some continuation of public space in a way that makes sense. We did want to ensure that we took that into account. If it's possible to coordinate with Provo City on this particular block, that would require the buildings to be taller. So and would increase your parking need. All of those can be overcome, but this is a flexible layout that even for some time in the future, that parking lot that option one had a new building in, that could also be a future building site if you wanted to start consolidating some additional government functions onto the site. So this layout meets your needs through 2040 and a little bit beyond, but also doesn't lock out options for the future beyond that. Does that help? Okay.
So there was some conversation on if this building was left, intact, and then build another building out in front of the historic courthouse, kind of where A's at, but just kind of push it further to the west.
Yeah.
There was that discussion going to a six-story building right there.
Yeah.
What happened with that discussion?
So we actually laid that out internally, and given the importance of the corner of Center Street and University Boulevard and the importance of the historic courthouse, putting a building all the way out to that corner really dwarfs the historic courthouse and looks funny in terms of it's 3 stories, and if you go much taller than that, it makes that building feel out of scale. And for from the designer's point of view, preserving the scale of that building within the context was important, which is also why you see a little notch in Building A, is to keep that building from getting too close to the historic courthouse and making it feel out of scale with the rest of what's going on the building. It's still possible to pull it out there and bring it closer to the corner. That creates some issues with access and how you're going to want to, one of our goals is to get people closer to the front door of Building A for handicap accessibility and things like that, to make sure that they can get there. You see the dotted line on this particular site plan. That's for a possibility of a looped drive instead of a cul-de-sac at the end of that access road. Because in this particular option, C is not a sky bridge, but it's a 3-story atrium shared lobby between the 2 buildings. So if you shifted Building A closer to the corner, you're not just going to make that floor plate longer, because that's an inefficient floor plate and creates additional challenges for the design of the building. You're gonna wanna shift the whole thing. And that would free up space to the east, but also pose some of these other challenges. And so as we were looking at that as a possibility, this particular configuration seemed to meet the overall needs in a more efficient way. Was that unclear?
Well, I mean, I'd have to see it on paper, but it's just,
Right,
it's interesting.
and I don't have a pointer. We would, if you move it all out, if you move building A out to the corner, it would have to be narrower, because it would come too close to, see that notch, it would
Right.
have to be the narrow version. Plus, you don't want it to get out of proportion in terms of length, and that's not just a design aesthetic, that's also for the functionality of the building. There are certain floor plates that are more efficient, more easy to construct than other floor plates.
Which relates to cost.
Which relates to cost per square foot.
Yeah.
And I guess part of that comes back to whether we want the buildings somewhat connected, right?
Right. You don't have to have them connected, as we showed in option 1.
Which almost seems to make better use of available space.
Option 1.
You can see in this view, that the 3D view, how these would overpower that courthouse. The scale.
So it looks, I mean, I'm just an observation with it. It looks like there's two immovables in this plan. First one's the historic courthouse, and the second one's the tree.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
And sorry, and so did you come to a recommendation on the downtown?
Yes. So this is not the recommendation, this is option 3. And the cost of option 3. So as a comparison of all those options, just in terms of total campus building square footage, the total cost estimate and the cost per square foot, just so that you can see those laid out. And then we did come up with a recommendation, which was to demolish the current administration building and construct 2 new administration buildings connected with a 2-story sky bridge. So you saw that option in options 2.1 and 2.2. Do the seismic upgrade and remodel of the historic courthouse and reallocate space in the Health and Justice building, and then construct the 100 East connection to Center Street and enhance the site. So in the new administration building A, we're recommending that you finish, that it be a 5-story building with 3 floors finished now, including having the county attorney on the 3rd floor. And the new administration building B being 5 stories with 3 levels finished, once again with the county attorney on the 3rd floor to give them that connectivity. That, I'm gonna, actually, I meant to switch the order of those, but the historic courthouse, that we're recommending that the county commission functions be in that building as well. And that leaves you 10,000 square feet for another function, which right now is identified as the public defender. It could be part of the county attorney's office if County Attorney Levitt wants to have his part of his function there. And public meeting space in order to meet the needs that the downtown campus has for public meeting space. And it means that the Health and Justice building becomes the Health and DDAPT building, because the Justice Court would be constructed on the 2nd floor of one of the new administration buildings. So you can see this achieves everything except the reuse of the current administration building and has an estimated, cost estimate of about $87.6 million.
So why push it all the way to the road and then elongate it instead of taking it in the footprint we have now, or if we're getting rid of this building?
Right.
And then making it, more boxy, but we're not right next to that building there if we're trying to show that building. Instead of pushing it that direction to hide part of it, we pull it this way and pull it this way. And then the other question would kind of be, why two buildings? Why not one building with, maybe a future build out to a side if we're doing it in some sort of phase?
So, I'm getting back to a site plan, hang on. Why does it go so fast when I'm going forward and goes so slowly when I go backwards? Okay. This one or the flat one? Okay. All right. So,
Maybe if I could just point to it.
yeah, why don't we point to,
If you're looking at here, right now, the current building comes up to here, right?
that's right.
Right in there.
Mhm.
Why not shorten this? We still highlight this because that was part of the concern that we're gonna dwarf it. So we move this over for access.
Mhm.
We build it down here and come across. Why couldn't we come across with, maybe you do the first phase of it? Or maybe you do the first phase here, so then you can go to here. I don't know where that current building probably goes over here.
Yeah.
And then make it all one big building.
So there are two reasons, two things at play there. One is we're trying to find the most efficient floor plate and configuration. So that's why all those buildings are roughly the same size and shape in terms of their floor plate. That's the most efficient floor plate to build and to maintain and for reconfiguring of space over time. And so if we made building A squarer as opposed to the rectangular shape that it is right now, that's not a very efficient floor plate and it's more expensive to construct and more difficult to program in terms of how we lay actual workstations and offices out on each of the floors. That's what
Just kind of an internal design.
it is, but
on
it
the
also
inside.
has code requirements to it in terms of distance to exiting and layout, and you can talk about this better than I can, but a square floor plate's just more difficult to work with and is more, in terms of laying out the offices and making sure we're meeting code and overall needs.
Well, it deals with like the structural grid. We're dealing with the most efficient structural grid. We've had a lot of experience in office buildings, so over time we've learned that this kind of shape is the best shape because you also have an internal core, and that fits the best in the middle of this kind of shape because you're going to need to have two ways out, so you'll have two stairways. The elevators can be centered, but then you have restrooms that you need to accommodate also. So it creates a nice, efficient central core to this kind of shape of building. But also having the rectangular shape is actually more energy efficient and actually allows more light to come into the building and be shared by all tenants. So there's a lot of different advantages to this beyond just costs. I mean, it's all related to cost, but yes.
It just seems to me like if you're building one building versus, two buildings, the cost goes up when you're building separate buildings.
Yeah, and we did, so we did an option 2.2 is an option where we build just one of those buildings first.
Right.
We have to build a taller building. So instead of being a 5-story building, it has to be a 6-story building. But it's still in the same construction type. So the cost per square foot is comparable, whether we just add a layer.
So is there limitations on the height in Provo?
So we did talk to Provo City about their zoning restrictions, and all of the recommendations are taller than the base zoning, but we have unlimited height by asking for a conditional use permit. And if you look at all the heights in the downtown area, even with the taller version, you're not as tall as the tallest. So they felt like that was a viable option.
Under Zions and.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have it loaded into the slide deck, and it's probably not even here, but we do have a map that shows the height of all the different buildings in downtown Provo.
Commissioner, when you meet a certain height, doesn't it trigger Provo City's, what is it called, high-rise building requirements? I think they have some
The
different
step
requirements.
backs, yeah.
They have some different requirements for the higher you go, at some point, you're gonna click into their high-rise
Right.
requirements.
And what that means is that we have to step the floors back every so many feet. So we haven't triggered it here with these heights, but if we go much taller, we would trigger those.
That was my point.
Oh, you mean you go up a floor and then you have to
And you
step
have
it
to come
back?
back in.
Oh, I got it.
And then come back in, so that it doesn't feel like the building's.
I think there's some construction materials change as well, as some other changes,
Well,
so.
Yeah, so we have to switch from the current building type to more expensive building type of what's handy. Or what is it?
I'm sorry, your
So
question.
the building construction type switches at what height?
Yes, it can, because it's based on square footage and building occupancy type.
But
So-
I don't think we're up against it yet.
No, but I wanted to add why they're also pushed up against the road is to mimic the fabric of the street opposite of that, on the other side of the street. That's what our design team looked at and said, that seemed to complement what was right across the street. So it kept that fabric going along Center Street there, so.
The other thing that achieves is that the green space that you currently have along Center Street is somewhat underutilized. So if we push the buildings closer to Center Street, that gives you that comparable open space here around the tree, which might make this space more usable and connects it better to what's happening on the corner.
Is that it, or are you moving on?
We probably should.
That's
wrap
it.
up, yeah.
I just had some information loaded up about the phasing and, dealing with the open seat and how you would phase construction here on this site. So we don't need to get into that. It's in your document.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank
It's a lot of work.
Been a lot of fun. All right. Thank you. Let's move that over
All
to-
right, is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, then we will move into our closed meetings. Thank you for being here. Thank you.